We've been at St. Matthew about 3 years now. Since we've joined St. Matthew, we have become involved in different activities such as Habitat for Humanity and outreach.
We've started our small group from a group of friends, and it's just been great. It's grown. It's created lasting friendships that I'm thankful for.
It's been just an amazing journey for us over the last 3 years, and it's been a huge impact. And because of St. Matthew, we're closer, we're stronger, we're better off than we ever imagined we could be 3 years ago.
St. Matthew just has so many doors that are available for you to go through and just experience life on such a different level than what I even anticipated church to be.
We hope that new members can come into the church and make the same relationships that we've made and have the same experiences that we've had through St. Matthew.
I just think maybe that's somewhere that a lot of people want and maybe a lot of people need.
We love the church.
I love the church.
Nothing is impossible for you. Nothing is impossible.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning to you here in the Ark. Good morning in the sanctuary. We are one body worshiping in two places. We are worshiping together. My name is Jeff Gale. I am humbled to be able to be one of your pastors, and I'm honored to be with you in this capacity today. And who you just saw was Tim and Johanna Love, and they're a couple that have been part of our church for a while now. And we played that because we want to remind us of why we're doing the things we're doing. We're going to be hearing a lot more about the Connecting Generations campaign, about the new building that's going to be built. A lot of disruption's going to occur physically out in that area for a bit. But the reason we do that is not, we're not just raising money. We're not just building buildings. We're moving forward and responding to God's call to share the love and grace of Jesus with as many people as we can. And what it's about, as Tim and Johanna, who I see right now, will testify to, it's about changed lives. It's about new beginnings. It's about being in a place where you can have an impact, not for yourself in this world, but for God through Jesus Christ. We cannot forget that story and the part of it that we play. This is an interesting point that we find ourselves in this month of May, at the end of the month of May, right? We have graduations, end of school, beginning of summer. A lot of narratives, a lot of stories are changing for kids, their families. Kids are moving away, kids are moving back. A lot of people move during the summers. A lot of changes occur. This is Memorial Day weekend. It's a time when we remember the stories of those who gave their all that we might enjoy the freedom that we're enjoying right now to worship as we are. It's all about remembering the stories. Stories can be quickly forgotten, can't they? I read a report in U.S. News and World Report about a study that was done across 100 different countries, and they were surprised to find that over half the people, and thousands were involved in this study, over half the people had never heard of the Holocaust. And of that half that had heard of the Holocaust, there was a large number of them who didn't believe it could have happened, thought it was a myth. And that wasn't that long ago, friends. It's a travesty to think that such an important account in history might be forgotten just after a couple of generations. We are bearers of the stories that we live, that we tell. And we cannot forget who we are, whose we are, and where we come from. And I will tell you right now that every one of you here, every one of us, is endowed with certain things, certain strengths, certain skills, certain abilities that others are not. Endowed by God to do work for God. You might think, well, not me, but I'll ask you, have you ever found yourself in a situation with somebody else where you were finding something very easy to do and you were frustrated with that person because they couldn't do it? It's like, come on, it's so simple, it's obvious, just do this. And I can't do it. Or maybe you've been with somebody who was frustrated with you, where they thought it was so simple, and you couldn't do it. Right? It just seemed to come natural. These are the strengths that I'm talking about. And if we want to live lives worth sharing, live stories worth telling, we have to come to realize that we are heroes of our own stories. You are the protagonist, the hero of the story that you live. And every one of us has been endowed in a heroic way with something that God can use from us, in us, and through us for His purposes. I want to talk this morning a little bit about living your life as a hero and a few things that you need to watch out for and keep in mind. But let's start with this. Many heroes are endowed with superhuman power. You think about our comic book heroes, Batman and the Hulk and these folks. We have a great Hulk today, by the way. These guys are endowed with superhuman strength. They can do things that others can't. But if you take out of the fictional characters and the fictional heroes and think about living heroes in our culture, people that can do things that seem freakish in nature. I mean, who can jump? Who can fly through the air like Michael Jordan could? Who can think like Einstein, right? I mean, these guys are celebrated for their freakish ability to do the things that the rest of us can't. A lot of heroes have this superhuman power. But when we talk about heroes of the faith are endowed with supernatural power, a power that is from God and which is greater than all of us. Here's the difference. Superhuman power, superhuman strength, superhuman ability, it's only super relative to the other people you're around, right? It's a relative power. But supernatural power, divine power, which comes from God, is absolute. And I want you to say something. Say, I can do all things. Say it. Through Christ, who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. When we say that, when we believe that, when we live out of that understanding, we're drawing on the supernatural power, the divine power of God. We're not talking about, having this strength because we've lifted a lot of weights. It's about drawing on God's strength to do what God needs to have done in this world. Heroes of the faith, like Samson and ourselves, are at high risk of falling due to three things. And we're going to look at the life of Samson in a minute. But the first risk that we all need to be aware of and be on guard against is identity amnesia. This is forgetting who we are, forgetting where we've come from, forgetting whose we are. And in the story of Samson, we find that this lies at the heart of his fall. We think of Samson as that strong biblical hero that took down all those Philistines, right? But we forget the story of his life and how fallen and broken he really was. And we're going to dive into Samson, and the story of Samson can be found in the book of Judges. So I want you to open your Bibles to chapter 13 in Judges. We're going to be in the Bible a lot today. If you don't have one, you raise your hand. We'll have a host bring it to you in the sanctuary. If you don't have one, there's one provided for you in the pews there. You can follow along, or you can just listen to the story if you like. But we're going to be in chapter 13, chapter 14, chapter 15, and chapter 16, because we got a lot to learn about this character named Samson. So here's how it begins. Chapter 13. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. That sets the stage. This was a time before kings in Israel, right? This was the period of judges. And the life for someone in the nation of Israel was such that they belonged to a particular tribe, and there were 12 tribes. And the tribes didn't always get along. There was infighting and disagreement and discord. But if there was anything that brought the tribes together, it was a common enemy, and it was the people of Philistines. So the Philistines were the enemy of Israel, and that's what brought Israel together to fight them. So, going on, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." And if you jump to verse 24, at the end of that chapter, it says, "The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him." It was a great start, wasn't it? A great start. But it's always a great start when we start off on this path that God sets us on, because we haven't had a chance to mess up yet, right? It's always great until we forget who we are and whose we are, and that the strengths that we're given are for God's purposes and not our own. You see, Samson was a Nazirite from the tribe of Dan, dedicated and set apart for the work of God. But as he grew, he found he had this strength and this ability that everybody around him didn't. And he got a little arrogant. He got a little proud. May have been a bit of a bully in ways. And he had become accustomed to getting his way and getting what he wanted. As he grew into a man, we find that he had a great weakness. A weakness for women. Not just any women, but Philistine women. So, in 14, the story goes on to tell how Samson falls for this Philistine woman from Timnah. And he comes home and he tells his mother and father about it. "I found the woman I love. I found her. She's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I got to have her, Dad. That's the one I want. Go get her for me." And Mom and Dad are like, "Oh, Sam, wait a minute. Hey, let's think about this. I mean, she's not of our tribe. She's not even of our people. She's of another culture. They don't understand our values. They don't understand our ways. Are you sure? I mean, life would be so much more simple if we found a local for you." "Nope, that's the one I want. And if that's the one I want, that's the one I'll have. Would you go get her for me?" So Samson's father says, "Okay, all right, I'll go get it. I'll go see what we can arrange." And his father makes the trip, arranges the marriage. And so it's time for the wedding, and the feast is to occur, and they have to travel to Timnah, their family, and Samson is traveling, and his parents are traveling, but they're separate. And Samson finds himself alone on the path, and he's in this wilderness area, and on the way, a lion jumps out to attack him. And that would have happened to a lot of us. We would have either been dead, or we would have run up a tree, or just scrammed something, right? But Samson, because of who he was able to take the lion and tear it apart. Now, that's not an ordinary thing. You don't see that too much in nature, right? And God wanted Samson to know, "Hey, Samson, this is not you. This is atypical. This is me showing you something." And out of the carcass of the lion that was torn apart, the swarm of bees starts coming out of it. And Samson sees it, and he sees that there's honey in it. And he reaches his hand down. "Is this real?" And he tastes on it, and it's sweet. Wow. So in God's showing Samson that this is supernatural, this is not human, Samson closes his eyes to it in his ears, and his first thought is, hey, I could use this to my advantage. So he continues his trek to Timnah for the celebration. And when he gets there, the custom was that 30 young men join the feast from her people, right? So he invites 30 young men to be a part of it. And here's how it goes. Chapter 14, verses 10 to 20. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, he chose 30 men to be his companions. And so he's hosting this party. And instead of making them feel comfortable and giving them something to drink, he says, "Let me tell you a riddle." Samson said to them, "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't tell me the answer in these 7 days, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." The 30 men thought about it. Okay, let's hear the riddle. So, drawing from his experience with the lion, he says, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." Now, he knows there's no way on earth that they're going to solve that riddle. There's no way. So for 3 days, they couldn't give an answer. So on the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we'll burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?" So Samson's wife threw herself onto him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people this riddle, and you haven't told me the answer. I'm your wife, Samson. You're supposed to share everything with me." He says, "I haven't explained it to my father or mother either. I'm not going to explain it to you." So she cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the seventh day, he finally told her, because she continued to press him. He gave in. He told her the answer to the riddle. And what did she do? She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people, gave them the answer. They come back, they tell Samson the answer, and what does he do? Turns into Hulk, right? Just becomes enraged. Enraged. He's not going to stand for this. So he goes down to Ashkelon, strikes down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle to him. Burning with anger still, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife had been given to one of the companions that had attended him at the feast. So in this fit that he was throwing, in this destruction, in this killing, he was absent, gone. They thought, well, Samson's not coming back. Well, what am I to do? I just got married to him. Here, take this guy. Let him be your husband. So he loses his wife. Well, he gets home. Guess what? Gets enraged. Becomes a Hulk again. I'm not going to stand for that. And he feels he's justified, so he's going to get revenge. So what does he do? The story goes, he takes 300 foxes. He ties them up. He lights them on fire. He sends them into the land of the Philistines, and the flames go into their fields, burns all their grain, all the vineyards, all the olive groves, lays waste to the whole countryside and their livelihood. So what? He's feeling better, right? He's got his revenge. He got even. Well, the story doesn't end. Surprise, surprise. You see, he has completely forgotten his purpose and his relationship with God. He's put his own desire for power and revenge above everything else. And he isn't believing that God can do all things. He's believing that he can do all things. He's fallen in headfirst to the second risk that we all have to be aware of. And that's allowing our strength to become our weakness. when our strength becomes our weakness, bad things can happen. It happens in three ways. Our strength becomes our weakness when we rely on ourselves instead of God. It happens when we use our strength only for our benefit and not God's. And it happens when we make that strength out to be bigger than it is. When we think that this strength that we have inside us comes from ourselves as if it came from God, and we become gods unto our own experience, unto our own lives, into our own universe. So that's where Samson was, right? So how'd it work for him? After he gets even, burns all their grain in their fields and vineyards and olive groves, he thinks all's well, right? Well, it doesn't end. What do the Philistines do? They become enraged. And they go and they burn Samson's wife and her father to death. So they're feeling good. Okay, we're even now. Oh no, then Samson becomes enraged. Rah! He says, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. How many revenges do we need? Right? But this is where he's going. So in chapter 15, it tells the story of how Samson goes and he slays 1,000 Philistines. And then we get to chapter 16. And this is where the story turns to what we're familiar with, that tale of Samson and Delilah. Remember, he had a weakness for these women. Delilah was no different. Verse 4 in chapter 16, let's read. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his strength. And if you do, and we can overpower him, each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. This was appealing to her. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. I mean, that question itself should have been a little suspicious, don't you think? Right? Samson, he's on to her. No. He says, okay, well, if anyone ties me up with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings, surprise, surprise, that had not been dried, and she tied him with them, with men hidden in the room. She called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, you have made a fool of me? You lied to me? Come now, tell me how you can be tied. And Samson's clearly onto her now, so he says, okay, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used before, I'll become as weak as any other man. So Delilah takes new ropes and tied him with them. And then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the ropes with his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, all this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied. He's got her right where he wants her. He replied, okay, if you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and then tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, guess what Delilah does? Catching on. Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with a pin. Again she called to him, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he says, He wakes up from his sleep and he pulls it out of his head. No big deal. It's embarrassing to her. I mean, here she is. She's called in her friends to take Samson and capture him, and he's not cooperating. So she says to him, how can you say, I love you, when you don't even confide in me? This is the third time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. And with such nagging, she prodded him day after day after day after day after day after day until he was sick to death of it. And you can just see him, can't you? You just see it when it's the straw that broke the camel's back. He says, fine, woman, okay, I'll tell you. Jeez, just leave me alone. If anyone takes a razor to my head and cuts off my hair, I lose my strength. Because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. And if my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. There, you happy? You happy? What else do you want from me? So now Delilah sees that he has told her everything, and she sends word to the rulers of the Philistines. Come back one more time. I promise, he's told me everything. So they come, they return with the silver in their hands this time. And after putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. And so she calls, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as I did before and just shake myself free. Because it's my strength after all, right? But he didn't realize that the Lord and his strength had left him. So the Philistines seize him. They gouge out his eyes. And they put him in prison, grinding grain for them. So I'm reading this and I hear the story and I think, where's the hero? Seems to be an epic fail, if you ask me. But the story's not over. And there's still time for redemption. And that's something for you and I to remember when all hope is lost, when we think it's done, it's over, we can't do anything else. The story is not over. As long as we live and as long as we breathe, God's invitation to relationship with him and God's invitation to use us for his purposes remains. All hope seems lost, but if we jump to 23, they're having a celebration, and while they're in high spirits, they shouted, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called him out of the prison. They brought him to the temple, and he performed for them. In this place, it's huge. There are 3,000 people. And it says, when they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple so I might lean against them. Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there. And on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching. Then Samson does something that he hadn't done before. He prays to God. He prays to the Lord and he says, just once, God, let me know that strength that you gave me again, that I might help deliver our people from our enemy. He prays this and he puts one hand on one pillar, the other hand on the other, and with all his might, he pushes, and the pillars come crumbling down. The whole place collapses. He knows he's given his life. This isn't for him. This is for something greater than him. And that was the day. That was the day that Samson became a hero of Israel and the faith. His father and brothers took his body, they buried him, they celebrated him, and he went into the annals of history as leading Israel for 20 years. I think of that story of Samson. And I think of what greatness he was destined for. But he fell short because his strength became his weakness. And he thought of himself for himself. And he forgot about God. He fell full force into that second risk. He relied on himself and became reckless and reactive. He used his strength for his own purposes, and he made his strength out to be bigger than it was because he forgot it came from God and he thought it was his own. But only when turning to God in the end, only when finally revealing himself in his humility and his weakness and his blindness, and calling upon not his superhuman strength, but God's supernatural strength, was he able to do the things that God had made him to do. Throughout his life, he allowed his pride and his bravado and arrogance to get in his way. And this downfall happened in the same way that it happens for so many of us, you and me, in our stories, as we try to be the heroes and the protagonists of our stories. And it's the third risk that seems most insidious at times. That's when we let our anger get the best of us. It was Samson's response to his anger that led to the slaughter of the Philistines, which led to the death of his wife and her father. It was his response to anger that led to his giving in to the incessant demands of Delilah to reveal to her the source of his strength. When we're angry, friends, we don't think straight. Our thinking is clouded, and we don't respond to situations, and we don't respond to people. We react. Any of you gentle people here ever experienced any little hint of road rage? You know what I'm talking about. I mean, you're cool. You're behind the wheel. You're not doing anything. But what's setting you off? It's all those other drivers. It's everybody else. If they would just do what they're supposed to do, I would be fine. Ever lose your cool with the ones who are closest to you? The ones you love the most? Ever say anything or do anything to someone you regret? It's, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or oh, I wish I hadn't done that. It's too late. It's been said, it's been done. It happens when we let our anger get the best of us. You know, you've been there before. At least you've seen it before. And you know it's going to happen as you're watching it unfold. And for some reason, some of us just can't help ourselves. And we allow the breaking point to come, even though you're trying. Just watch this. He was so under control, right? I mean, you just saw it building and building and building. That's from a movie, I think it's called Anger Management, right? So the Bible is clear. I mean, if you look in this book, there is instruction after instruction after instruction after instruction about we as followers of Jesus, as believers in God, citizens of the kingdom of God. I mean, anger is an important thing that we have to watch out for. I mean, it's a natural thing. We all get angry, and anger is right and appropriate in certain times and certain situations. But when we let it get the best of us, when we can't control it, when we can't respond appropriately, and we just begin to react, things are at risk of imploding or exploding, and things can get really messy. And that's what we don't want to happen. One of the days in your life steps, you're going to be in Proverbs. That's the whole day. And I'm not going to ask you to turn to the Proverbs right now, but just listen as I say some of these out loud to you. Proverbs is one of the books of wisdom in the Bible, and it's filled with instruction on how to live life. And there are a number of them that deal with anger. Listen to some. A patient man has great understanding, but a quick-tempered man displays folly. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Better a patient man than a warrior, a man who controls his temple than one who takes a city. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. If we wish to live up to the hero's potential in each of us, in our stories, in the stories we live, we have to put into place some safeguards that keep us from imploding or exploding at these vulnerable moments. You know, when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're sick, when we don't feel good, we got to recognize that, right? We got to understand that our tolerance threshold might be narrowed a bit, and we got to approach others with an extra dose of grace and patience and understanding. But I want to give you some practical things to guard yourself against so that you can sort of have some armor as you are a hero in your life and in God's work. Here's the first thing. Guard yourself against a sense of entitlement. Whenever you feel like you deserve something, check yourself. Maybe you do. Maybe you do deserve it, but often the world is not going to see it that way. You got to come to the realization that sometimes life is not fair, and you're not going to get the glory that you think you deserve for all that you have sacrificed, all that you have done, all the difference you have made. You find this sense of entitlement creeping in, you got to check yourself, push it away. Push it away. Change your focus. Adopt the truth and understanding that life is not fair. And then once you get there, once you realize that that's okay with you, and you don't need the glory because what you do is you live for God and not yourself. And you want God to be glorified. When you don't get the glory, you're okay. And if you do get the glory, you're okay. It's not the end all for you. Watch out for a sense of entitlement. The second thing, inflexible expectations. Turn your Bibles to James, New Testament, toward the end of the New Testament, right? You will find James in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Look what it says. Those conflicts and disputes among you, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You see? It's your desires that you want. You want something, but you don't get it. You kill and you covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and you fight. You have not, because you do not ask God. Think about your anger. When you get angry, so much of it stems from this loss of control, and you expect something to go a certain way, or you expect to get something and you don't get it. When things don't go the way we expect them to, be on guard in those times. Be on guard of your own tendency and your own vulnerability to snap and react because of the threat of anger boiling up. When we feel out of control, our tendency is to want to be controlling, right? David Banner, the mild-mannered scientist who became the Hulk, often became the Hulk when he couldn't control the situation. And so he turned into this monster which could affect more power, more strength, more rigidity to take control of the situation. But in the end, it just was damaging and destructive. So while that tendency to be stronger, to tighten our grip, to be more rigid, just understand that when you do that, you're at risk of becoming more brittle. And when you're more brittle, you're more prone to break. Sometimes the move isn't this. It's flexible. It's fluid. It's relaxing and letting the circumstance be. It's not what you expected. You planned your outdoor wedding and it's pouring down rain. All right. It's all right. You can still get married. It'll still happen. Right? You drove all that way to Wally World and it's closed. It's all right. You're still together. You're still a family. Don't take the security guard hostage. be flexible and allow unmet expectations to just happen. The third thing to be on guard against is emotion trumping logic. Boy, emotions, they are the maker and breaker of our relationships, aren't they? If you've ever been in love, think back to that time you were in love. Oh my gosh, she is perfect. She has no faults whatsoever. He is awesome. Whatever your situation was, right? That person could do no wrong. And they are perfect, and they will be perfect forever. Oh, I just love this. I can't believe I ever found anyone like this. And in that place of emotion, you're blinded by love, you're blinded by that other person, that false sense of perfection. You make decisions that have lifelong impact. You're not thinking clear, folks. Flip side, same way. You go ahead, you get married, you're in love, right? And you stay with that person for years, and it comes to a point where you're not in such a loving place. And you begin to irritate each other. And you begin to fight. And the fights you have make no sense. You wouldn't be fighting about them with anybody that you work with or go to school with or outside your home. Nobody else. It's just this one person, and you seem to fight about everything. Again, you're in this emotional place where everything gets to you. Here too, we're lashing out, we're reacting out of this place of emotion. And in this way too, we make decisions that have impact that last us all of our lives. So here's the rule. Here's the new rule. Don't make decisions with long-lasting implications when you are emotional. Got it? Don't make decisions with long-lasting implications when you are emotional. That's why we, whether that's your family, your spouse, your partner, your career, your school, your church, your faith. We're not going to have emotionally manipulative altar calls here. We don't do that. Because we don't want you to make a decision about your faith or becoming a member of the church and being a part of this faith community when you're all clouded by this emotional experience you've had in worship. Have the experience. I think God gives us those experiences, and I think those emotions are great. We should bathe in them, experience them, and give thanks for them while they're here. But when you decide to be a part of this faith community, we want you coming in with eyes open and understanding what you're committing to. And being a part of it, not out of an emotion, but out of a realization that this is the right thing. This is where God is leading me. When you have a decision to make, don't base it on how you feel. Think about Samson, and every poor decision he made was emotional in nature. Be prayerful and thoughtful about your emotions. And the fourth thing is speaking or acting before thinking. James 1:19-20 says, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to anger. For man's anger does not bring about the righteousness or the righteous life that God desires." Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Don't try to take control out of God's hands. If you do, you're going to live a frustrated and miserable life trying to control everything yourself. Consider God's will in all that you do and in all that you are. And if you practice being in that place of comfort in the unknown, and that you don't have to be in control of everybody and everything, but you can respond appropriately as God calls you to in certain situations, you will have room and space in your life where you will be free of so much anger and malice, and you will have happiness and joy fill and define your life, and that's a life worth living. It's short, and we don't need to waste it or destroy it with all this rage. So, when we work with couples in premarital counseling or marriage enrichment, there is actually 10 steps that we talk about when we talk about that most important component of conflict resolution. And I know the time, I'm not going to give all 10 of those to you this morning. But if you were to put into practice one thing that would be a strength builder in your relationships and in your life, when you find yourself in conflict with your partner, your loved one, anybody, and you find that you are emotional, do this one thing. Say, let's stop. Let's set a time to come back when we're cool-headed and we can talk about it. Because when you're emotional, you're not thinking clear. And you might be in a full rage, but the whole argument, the whole fight might be about which way you turn the toilet paper on the roll. You know, and that's not the problem. But in that moment, you don't know. You're just, and you did this, and you always, and you never. You know, oh my gosh. Don't let that take your energy and your space. Say, okay, let's come back when we can think clearly, when we're cool. Set a time. Don't just say, I'm not going to talk about that when you're angry. Don't do that. Say, okay, let's come back in an hour. Let's come back in 2 hours. Let's go to dinner. Go to a public place to talk about it. Oh, that's a great idea. Go out in public, right? And talk about it and define the problem. Okay, it wasn't the toilet paper. What is it? Let's talk about it. And you'll have an audience in the restaurant and you'll behave. You better behave, right? Do that one thing. And if you want all the other steps, email me, connect with me. I'll give you the rest of them. But that will bring such space and strength into your relationships and in your life. I just encourage you to do that. Okay, so I'm wrapping up. Here's the thing. We're celebrating Memorial Day. We remember those who gave their lives. And we think about those who died. And that's the point of Memorial Day. But anytime you give your life's energy, your money, resources, time, let's say you live, you're giving your life. You've given your life to a cause that's bigger than you. And so we honor those whose physical lives were lost, but we also honor you who gave your life to the protecting of our freedoms. And we thank you, and we thank you. And we are able to be in this great country of ours, the United States of America, which we are citizens. And to be a citizen of this country, we say we will abide by its laws. Here's the problem. It's not a problem with our laws. There's a shift in our culture right now. I was troubled this Memorial Day weekend. I saw a commercial yesterday on TV. Ronald Reagan's son. The commercial ran and he said, I would like you to join with me and others in the freedom from religion movement. Not freedom of religion, which people fought and died for, right? But freedom from religion. He said, I am an avowed and unapologetic, I'm a proud atheist. And I choose to live my life without the fear of going to hell. Won't you join me? And I thought, Ron. And I wanted to talk to him, but he can't hear me from that side of the camera, right? So say, Ron, wait. I don't know what you're saying here because I don't think you know what you're saying here. You say you don't believe in God and you're a proud atheist and you're asking everybody to join you in this freedom from religion movement, but I don't think you know who God is, because if you did, I think you would understand that you're not getting away from him. I think what he was doing was he was turning away from a tyranny of religion, from a fear-driven, legalistic form of religion that does not represent itself through the teachings of Jesus Christ, who tells us that God is love. I think he wants to turn toward love, not away from it. I'd say, Ron, you don't believe in God, but you believe in love? How can you believe in love and not believe in God? You see, we have forgotten our story. We have forgotten who we are and whose we are. And we need heroes of the faith. Our country is wonderful, but there is not one law in all of its laws that says you must love. You are a citizen of our country. You are a citizen of the kingdom of God. And in the kingdom of God, we have one law. And that is, we love. What would the world be like without love? What would the world be like without God? The church, the body of Christ, Jesus Christ and God need you to be a hero for the faith and remind the world of the good news. Our country is becoming more and more litigious, and that should be alarming. That should be alarming. But in this kingdom, we have true freedom to love and to express love. And it is our guiding law. You have a story to live, a story to tell. And God has given you things, strengths, abilities, gifts to use for His glory. If you do that, I can tell you, you will be a hero for God, and you will live a life worth sharing. Won't you be a hero? Be a hero. Be a hero. And be happy in this life that God has given you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go from this place, celebrate your freedom, and exercise the love that you have.